Hello everyone, it's Natasha here from Treasure Books. So I recently put up a video of this little treasure book, as I like to call it, and you guys loved it so much and you left me some beautiful comments. Thank you so very much for that. I really appreciate it. A lot of you have asked me for a tutorial, so that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to do a tutorial on this book. It's an accordion style book, and basically the idea behind it was to use up my little scraps and to make a nice little piece of art. You can have a look at the flip through of this book. I will leave it in the description box below. Today we are going to make this book together. It's exactly the same structure. How you fill it up and what you do inside is totally up to your imagination. Let it run wild and come up with some of your own beautiful ways of embellishing your book. So we will do this complete book from the beginning to the end. What I did here is I used some different shapes. So I've got some leaf shapes or petals. I've got some rectangles, some bigger rectangles, some smaller ones. Just to make it a little bit different to this, I wanted to do something a little bit different, just so you can see sort of what you can do, how you can play around. I will go through each step of the way through the process. So I hope that I've done everything, I've explained everything well. If you do have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to help and to answer them all for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Thank you so much for being here and for leaving me those beautiful comments. I really appreciate it. Okay, so have fun, guys. Okay, so this is how I planned my project before starting anything. I had an idea and then I went about working out how I can actually do it. So it has to be done in a particular order. Because of what I had envisioned, it has to be done in this particular order. So the inside, the accordion part, which is this, has to be done first. Everything needs to be embellished and sewn on before you attach it to the actual cover. The accordion part has to be sturdy cardstock, because when your book is open like this, if it's really flimsy paper, it's not going to hold the weight, depending on what you put on your little scraps here. So you want something that's going to be able to withstand and that's going to be sturdy. So like a cardstock, and I'll show you what we can use. You want a heavy cover, so nothing flimsy. Again, you want it to be able to stand and not fall over when you open it like this. And this part, so the inside must be done first, and then the cover, the fabric on the cover will be done. That's step 2. And then the step 3, we glue the flap onto the cover, and then we cover that with paper. It's all going to make sense when I show you, when we actually go and do it. So this is my prototype, and this is usually how I plan my project, so that I know what comes first. Okay, I'll put this aside. So what you're going to need for this project is 3 pieces of paper. So the size, it doesn't really matter, but for this purpose I used A4 paper. It's actually A4 length, only because it's more universal, but it's a little bit higher. So I mean, that doesn't really matter, but I'm just letting you know for this video what I'm using. So you want 3 pieces. This is cardstock. I'm not sure what weight exactly it is, but it's not, you know, your usual copy paper, and it's not really thick either. So you want to be able to, if you're going to do some sewing, you want to be able to use your sewing machine on it. So nothing too heavy. Okay, so we've got 3 pieces. You can really, if you want, you can use 2 pieces, you can use 4 pieces, depending on how many little accordion sections you want. But today I'm using 3 pieces of cardstock or heavyweight paper. Next thing you need is something for the cover. So I used a book cover, and I de-gutted the book, and that's what I'm going to use. The only thing you have to make sure is that your the height of your paper corresponds exactly to the height of the book, of the cover. So I had to trim my paper down a little bit. It was a little bit higher. So, and you don't want it shorter either, because when you're standing your book up, you want to have support all the way through. So in my book here, you can see it's pretty much exactly the same. So when I put my book down like this, it has support on the covers, and this is also holding it upright, so it's not falling over. Okay, so that has to correspond. You need 2 pieces of that. Next thing you need is some fabric to cover the book, cover. And you can, I've already cut mine down. You can see it has to be cut so you have space around, so then we can glue it down and so forth, which we'll go through all of the steps together. And another thing you need is some nice scrapbook paper that you're going to use to cover the inside of the cover. See that? Okay, one of those, and then your scraps. So I've tried to correspond the colors. It doesn't have to, you don't have to do that, but I decided for this project to use greens. So I'm using all of my little green scraps that go together, that the colors work together, and the cover and the inside. So it's all going to be harmonious. All right, so now that we've got everything that we need, I can put this aside and I can show you the next step. So first, as I mentioned, we need to do the inside. We need to do the accordion. So for this part, I have a scoreboard. If you don't have one, you can certainly still make this without a scoreboard. I only recently got a scoreboard and I didn't have it for years. So there are ways. You can use a ruler, for example. So you would just mark where you want to fold, and then, you know, mark on both sides and then use your ruler. I'm sure you know this, but anyhow. Okay, so we've got our scoreboard. Now, I decided for my project, I wanted to do 2 inches. It's just easier. And that basically means once you fold, this area will be 2 inches. Okay, so now I'm going to mark my 2 inches all the way to the end of the paper, and I have to do this for all 3 of my papers. If you're using A4, and that's why I did this A4, you will have a shorter flap at the end. It's not quite 2 inches. You probably can't see this in the video. So this is a shorter flap. Keep that in mind. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Let me just do all of them now. So 2 inches, and then we've got the shorter flap at the end. So when you will see why I'm mentioning this shorter flap, and you will have to keep in mind whichever size oh, that's not 2 inches, whichever size paper that you use, you have to, when you're folding, you have to keep it in mind. You'll see why. Okay, so now let's start folding. So we'll go this way and then the other way. So you're doing kind of I don't know the right terminology, but like kind of a zigzag thing. I hope I'm in frame. Here we go. That's what we're doing. So we've got one. Then we've got the next one. Okay. We'll fold all 3 and then we'll continue. Okay. So now, as you can see from my little prototype here, when we put them together, we want the end flaps to be facing down so that we can stick it onto the cover. So see how, for example, in this one, they're facing, yeah, they can be down. Whereas if they're like this, they're sloping down. Does that make sense? So you want it to be able to glue it down like this. Whereas if it was this way, you can't glue that down. Like that whole section comes down. Okay, I think that makes sense. So you want them to be, let's say you want them to be pointing up. I think that's what I was trying to say. So now we need to put them together. We've got this flap is pointing down, and then we've got these two. They can come together. Now I'm going to show you what I mean with the shorter flaps. See how there's two shorter flaps here? I'm going to put them together and show you what happens. We're going to glue all of this down, but just want to show you. Okay. When you put the two shorter flaps together, this is what happens. It's out of whack. So you don't have to remember short flap, long flap. You just have to remember to double check once you put them together. Put them together and double check that it's that all the peaks are at the same level. So now, as you've seen, I've got two shorter flaps. I'm just going to flip it around and put the shorter flap onto the longer flap. And now when we put it all together, they are all aligned. So this section will be glued down and this section will be glued down. So what I'm going to do now, I think I might use a little bit, oh, sorry guys. Okay. So I'm just going to use a little bit of my glue. I like to use this clear drying craft glue. I think this is acetone based, which means that it dries very quickly and it doesn't warp the paper. So I'm just going to use a little bit here because I will sew anyway, so it doesn't have to. I just wanted to keep it in place until I sew them together. If you are not planning to use your sewing machine, I would suggest that you use a stronger glue and you cover the whole, not a stronger glue, but I mean you cover the whole section. And I might actually do down here as well. So yeah, so if you're not sewing, you might, you know, I might as well now that I might as well just do it. Let's do this for demonstration purposes. Okay, and you want to line it. So let's see if I did that right. So just keep checking as you're going along. Just keep checking. Yeah, so that's right. I've glued that down. Press it down. Perfect. Let's go back to our accordion. That's looking good. So now, oh, I think it was this way. So now we've got the short and the long flap. Let's just double check. Yes, they're all aligning. Perfect. So now I have to glue that to that. Put a bit of glue. Okay. Okay. It's all perfectly aligned. It's looking good. I'm going to make sure if any glue has seeped out that I take care of it straight away so that it doesn't glue where it's not supposed to. And that's also why I like that glue, because if a little bit seeps out, you can just rub it off. It's like a rubber erasing. Okay. And that is our accordion. Okay, so because I was rushing, you can see that this section is poking out a little bit. I should have maybe pushed it a little bit more in, but honestly, once the book is done, it's not going to matter. Like that little, you don't want it poking out, you know, a centimeter out, but it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. So I can just peel it off because it's not dried yet, but you know what, I'm just going to leave it because I think that's fine. So these two flaps will be glued down onto the cover. So what I like to do, just to remember, is I'll write myself a note. This side down, and then in here, this side down. So then I know when I come back to my accordion, when I need to embellish it and put little scraps on it, I know to do it on this side because this is going to be stuck down. Imagine if I make a mistake and I start sticking them on this side and then I have a problem. Well, it's not a problem. It can be fixed. We're just losing a peak. All right, so I hope that makes sense with the accordion. And now we have, let's see how many peaks. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Something froze there. 7 peaks. And now you have to work out how many pieces of bits you want on each piece. So that way you know sort of how many embellishments you have to make. So for this one I was planning to do, for my first one I did little leaf things, but I think for this one I'm going to do little maybe all different shapes, or maybe I'll do all little rectangles and some bigger ones, some shorter ones. So now is the fun part. Now you start preparing your little pages, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go and I'm going to get all of my stuff ready. When I was doing the leaves here, I embellished each one. I cut it out, embellished it, and then I came back to my accordion. So that's what I'm going to do now with this one, and then we will do the next step. Okay guys, so there's just one thing I wanted to let you know. So I've cut up my pieces. I have decided to go with different shapes. So I'm going to do some thin ones, thin rectangles, thick rectangles, and I'm going to also do some leaves just to make it a little bit more interesting. So one thing that you need to keep in mind before you start cutting and embellishing, actually two things I think. So you need to check the size, and you only need to do this if you don't want your little bits and pieces to stick out of your book. If you do want that, which that can look really nice too and attractive, but if you don't want that, you have to keep that in mind before you start you know, embellishing and stuff, because see how in this book they fit perfectly. Yes, that's one thing you have to keep in mind before you actually start embellishing. So what I did is I chose, I think it was this piece that I chose, and I just wanted to check the size. So I don't want it to, when I glue it in or sew it, I don't want it to be all the way down here. I want it to be somewhere up here, okay? And then when I have my cover, which, where is my cover? It's here. That's my cover. So I have to make sure that it fits in, and that fits perfectly. So that way I knew when I was doing my scraps over here, I wanted to sort of make them all similar size. So some of the things like this leaf, for example, is sticking out a little bit. And I can, as I'm working, I can just trim that down a little bit before I sew it in, or when I start sewing I can move it down a little bit like this, okay? But for now I'm just going to trim it down. So yes, so that's one thing. All of your scraps should be sort of similar length, so it's not sticking out of the book if that's not what you want. All right, how many scraps do you need? You can easily work that out. So for example, I've got 7 peaks. Oh, it's this way, see? That's why it's good to write down on the flap. Okay, so it's this way. I've got 7, 2, 4, 6, 7 peaks. And on each peak, I will have about 6 pieces of paper. 3 on this side, 3 on this side. Oh no. Okay, so you can see in this book, I had 3 on this side, 2 on this side, but then on some of them, I had 3 on both sides. So the number is approximate. I had 3 and then there was 2 here. Anyway, so if I'm just going to go with 3 on each side, which means 6 pieces of scraps for 1 peak. And I have 7 peaks. 7 times 6 is 42. So I cut down 42 pieces. Another thing to think about, last thing to think about before you start embellishing, you will have some pieces pointing this way and then some pieces this way. So for example, if you want to use this image, or if you want to do a little phrase when you're embellishing, like this one, for example, you can't embellish all of your pieces to be pointing that way, because then they'll be upside down when you stick them here. So the way I did it, I did a pile of pieces that will be glued on this side, and then I did a pile of pieces that will be glued on this side as I was embellishing. So just to show you, see how these ones are the right way up, and then here. And then I also had something which can go on either side, like this one for example, and these unembellished leaves. So yes, that's one thing to keep in mind. So now what I'm going to do, I'll do this off camera and then I'll come back and then I'll show you how we can stick them on and then sew them on. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to embellish these. I will do minimal embellishing. I'm not going to do all of them. Just for the purpose of this tutorial, I wanted to show you how I do it. So I'm going to go and ink around some of them. I'm going to sew around some of them. I might add some phrases. Most of them I'm going to leave blank. You could, if you want to sew around each piece, obviously you have to do it before it's put in the book. In terms of writing and embellishing and adding little phrases like this sort of thing, you can do that after you finished your book. It really depends on how you want to use this book. If you want to use it to write on each piece every day, it can be a gratitude journal, or add bits and pieces too as you go along. So it just keep in mind how you want to use it. You can leave them all unembellished like this and put them in and then work on them as you go. But what I did is I embellished them all and then put them in. So that's what I'm going to do now. And then once that's all embellished, I'll come back and then I'll show you how I put them on, how I arrange them, and then how I sew them on. All right, I'll be back soon. Okay, so I've done all of my little scraps. I decided not to embellish them at all. The only thing that I did is I've sewn around them. It just adds a bit more interest, and I really like the look of that sewn edge. So I've first inked all around and then I sewn around. So for this for the purpose of this tutorial, I decided to leave them blank. I didn't want to add any more embellishments because I think I'm going to list this book in my Etsy, so I want to leave it for the recipient. But some of the things that you can do, is fabrics and die cuts and flowers and little phrases. I did things like little scraps, what are they called? Some, fabric scraps and little bits and pieces like this. Anything that comes to mind really can, stamps and punch outs and little circles and more flowers and lace and all that sort of thing. So I decided to not do that with this one, but these are just some ideas that you can do to embellish yours. But for now, just for the purpose of this tutorial, let's pretend these are all embellished and ready to go. So now you need to assemble how you want to glue them onto your accordion. So remember how we wrote this side down? Make sure that's our flap that's going to be glued onto our book. So now what we need to do is assemble how you would like your pieces to go. If you don't really care, you can just pop them anyway. But I sort of did a little bit of arranging, like for example, you know, just playing around, like, oh, I think I'll have this one here, and then I think I'll have this one here, and then I think I'll put this one here, and so on, right? So make sure you've got both sides done. So let's say, for example, I'm happy with this, and let's say, let me just do one. But I want to make sure that it looks nice. So let's do the first one. Okay, so let's say I'm happy with this. Okay, so then I've done the full thing, for example. I'll do that off camera, but I just want to show you how I did it. So I arranged them, and then before I go and sew them on, I actually just put a little bit of this double-sided sticky tape just to hold it in place. So I just want to make sure that, you know, they're not all going to fall out when I pick it up to go and sew. So just a little bit of double-sided sticky tape, and then you put them all where you want them to go, and then we can go back, we can go and sew. So I'm going to go do that now. I'll be right back. Okay guys, so I have done the whole book. I've glued them all down. So before I go and put it through my sewing machine, first I'm going to double check that they're all sitting properly, they're all aligned, and bits and pieces are not sticking out. So let's have a look with my cover. Yep, that's perfect. Perfect. And I'm just going to double check that everything's sort of nice and straight, and that everything is the right way up. So that's looking good. So I don't want perfection, but I want to make sure that, you know, everything's looking okay. Okay, so far, okay, so this one is a little bit crooked. And so I'm just going to fix this one up. Okay. Oh, all three of these ones are a bit. Looks like I need to gently peel this one off. Okay, that's looking better. Let me just see. This one is a little bit crooked as well. I mean, most normal people wouldn't care about stuff like this, but because I notice these things, I keep telling myself to stop being a perfectionist. But then, all right, I'll accept that. I'll accept that it's okay. I think that's looking good. All right, so the reason why I like to sew them on And if you're not going to sew them on, then you should glue this section here. So I'll show you why. When the book opens, as these peaks are opening, the little flaps are going to start pushing against each other. Not that it really matters much, but to me it does. So when I sew them down, you can see in this book, because they've been sewn up here, the flaps are sewn right there. The flap can't open all the way, so the leaves are not pushing against each other. So that's why I like to sew. So the way that I'm going to do it, you might be thinking, how am I going to put this through my sewing machine? So the way that I do it is I put this flap out of the way, and then I've got that section free to put through my sewing machine. When you get going to the next section, just make sure you're always pulling this flap out, because I made a mistake and sewn the flap in. I mean, it's nothing that, okay, so this is what I did here. I put the flap here, and then I ran this through the sewing machine, and I actually sewed the flap in. It can be fixed. I fixed it, but just be mindful. So that's it. Separate the section, put it through the sewing machine. And I'm going to go and do that now. I'll just show you with this one. With my other book, I did just a normal, I don't know what these stitches are called, because I don't understand really sewing machines. But yeah, I did just this straight stitch, I think it's called, and then I did a bit of zigzag and then straight and zigzag, so you can play around with that. All right, so I'm going to go and do this, and then I'll come back and show you. Okay, so I've just finished sewing. I've done all of them. So the double-sided sticker that I used inside, its only purpose is to hold it in place so that I can sew. You might want to keep in mind about your sewing not going through the actual double-sided tape, because it might stuff up your needle. I'm not sure, but mine didn't go through because I put the double-sided tape here at the ends and I've sewn up here. It's just something maybe you might want to keep in mind. So I've done all of the pages, and now you can see that there's only so much that this is going to open, so that the pages, these little flaps, are not pushing against each other. And sewing around here also gives it some structure, and you know, that way it can sort of stand without falling. You just want to make sure that your sewing is not all the way here, because then it wouldn't be able to open well, I don't think. I'm not exactly sure what would happen. I just don't think it would work. So all of these threads, I've actually I've tied a knot. I just left one here. I've tied a knot and I cut them off. So I'm just going to do it to this one. Okay. And yeah, I just like to make sure that everything is nice and secure and things are not going to start unraveling and falling apart. So that's why I like to tie those knots, even though I did sort of backstitch too. Okay, so now that that's done, the next step is our cover. So we've got our book board, I think, and we've got our material, and I'll show you how I glue it down. So I'm just going to get rid of these little bits, not that it matters, it's all going to be glued down anyway. Okay, so this is how I do it. You want to have a little bit of fabric. You don't want to have too much or too little. Okay, so you can use hot glue gun for this, but I use this quick drying glue. So I just put a little bit in the corner. I do the corners first, and you will see that this dries quite quickly. Sometimes I like to just clamp it down just for a little bit, only a few minutes. Okay, then I'll do this corner. Okay, now let's do these two. So here we go, put that down. And then this one. So I kind of, as I do it, I do pull it tight. I do like everything to be tight. Okay, so the next thing would be, now we do this. So what I like to do, because I like my corners nice and neat, I like to first test it out. So okay, so I prepare my corners. I'll show you, only because I like everything to be sort of perfect and you know, neat. So this is just me preparing, and then I will glue. I don't like these two bits to overlap, because then it creates a large bulge, and this is why, that's the only reason why I do this, because this fabric, it's upholstery fabric, which means it's quite thick, and if you're using fabric that's not so thick, you don't have to worry about the corners not these bits overlapping. And the reason why I do this is just I like to keep it nice and tight, so then you know it's tight here. Okay, all right, I'm just checking if I'm a frame. All right, so let's do this first one. Okay, so I put a bit of glue on the fabric and then up here. You have to be careful, depending on which glue you use, you don't want it to show through the fabric. And with this glue, it's clear, it's fast drying, so I don't have to hold it down a lot. And you can probably see how a little bit of glue is seeping through the fabric. That doesn't bother me here because this is going to be covered anyway. But if I was to glue this whole side, which I don't need to, I would have to be careful with what glue I use. So while this is drying, I might just give it a little bit of help with this. Now let's do this side. Okay, pop a little bit of glue there, glue here, and glue everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but. And as I'm gluing, I'm really pulling that down, like I'm pulling it tight. I want it tight. Okay. Now let's do this side. And the bits that are coming up, I will come back to. I would probably, you know, if I'm not filming, I would spend a little bit more time holding things down until they're dry, until they're really dry. So I usually, you know, I'll be watching videos, sitting here holding it down, taking my time, which I can't do right now. I might have to speed this up, but so, or you can speed it up actually. And also this is now the part where I should be doing some little chit-chatting, isn't it? But I'm not very good at that, so I don't know what I would talk to you about. I don't want to talk about the weather because, you know, who cares about the weather? So now let's talk about this. Now, after I finish this, you would do one and then you would do the other cover, which I've already done. so that we can move along to the next step. Okay, when I'm not filming, this process seems so much quicker. But you really want to make sure that this is glued down. You don't want it to be moving around or lifting once you place your paper down on top of this. So it's really important that it's glued down. Plus the glue on the paper you'll be putting on top is going to help it as well. So I'll just be using maybe some clips. Now check this side, see that it's all nice and tight and crease free. So even if you've got fabric, you don't have to iron your fabric, as long as when you're doing this process you're pulling everything tight, and then that looks beautiful. Okay, so when that's done, you need to grab your piece of paper that you decided to cover your inside cover with. I decided to go with this paper, and then what you do is, I'm going to put this one aside because it's got the clips. I've already done my other one, so I'll show you on this one. So then you just measure. This is how I measure. It's easier to get the correct measurements this way. So I want it to go all the way up, not all the way up, but I just want a little bit of space. So you can see in this one how there's a little bit of space. That's what I want. So I'll just mark it here, and then about down here, and then I would trim that down, and I do it for both sides. So, and I've already done that just so that you guys don't have to wait. And also another thing that I did is I sewed around it already, and what that does is create the illusion that the whole thing is sewn. So it creates the illusion of this being sewn to that, but it's actually only glued. It just looks more finished, I think, more complete. So that's done. This is the one that I did, and it's already dried. So I'm just gonna glue. Oh, I nearly forgot. Before we glue this onto that, we need to glue this onto that. So this flap comes down here, and then this goes over the top. So let's have a look. I want, when I'm lining this up, I want it to line up exactly. I want it to be exactly in line with the cover. I don't want it to be out here, or you know, out here, because we have to think about the book opening. So if it's up here, these bits are going to be hitting the cover. So that's why it needs to be exactly aligned. You can see here how it's exactly aligned. That's what we want. So let's do that. What I do is I just trim down here a little bit so that it's not showing when I put my paper down. So just a little bit, like that. Now this is where we need this side down, so we're not sort of doing it, you know, upside down. Okay, so I like to use I find that this Yes paste is really quite strong, so I usually like to use two different glues. So I will use Yes paste, and then I will also use this around the corners, and then I will also reinforce it with some masking tape. So that's how I do it, because I like everything to be really, really secure. So let's pop this down. Be careful it doesn't get onto your project. or in spots where it's not supposed to be. Okay. So just spread that yes paste. I find this, I only use this yes paste for this sort of thing, where I really need something to be really, really secure, and where I don't want any paper warping. And this is definitely not going to warp your paper. So then I go along with this glue, and I'll just put it on the edges, just to make sure. So then we've got the flap is glued down. Then we'll use masking tape, and then we'll stick this paper on. It might be overkill, but this book is definitely not going to fall apart. You don't want your books falling apart after a year, you know. I've made some books where, that's why I don't ever use glue stick anymore. Ooh, 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 ooh. Be careful. Because I find that, or double-sided tape. Double-sided tape doesn't hold. You could use double-sided tape here for the fabric, but it's not going to last. This is the tricky part. So I'm just going to pop a scrap paper here because I want to protect my pages from the glue, and then I'll do it this way. Okay, am I happy with this placement? Let's have a look. I'm happy with that. And I'm just going to push that down. I'm just pushing it down, making sure. Okay. I just need something to hold it there for me. Okay, now I'm pushing it down, working it in, working it in, working it in, making sure it's really firmly down. And then, just for a little bit of an overkill, just to make sure that things stay where they should, I go and I put more reinforcements. So I just use a little bit of masking tape. Come on, stay. Yes. Sorry, I'm just checking if I'm in frame. Okay. So I feel like this needs to really be glued down well because of the way that it's structured, and there will be, oh, I don't want this to show. There will be strain placed on the book every time it opens. It will be placed onto this flap, so you don't want it to lift, because then if it lifts, it will lift this paper as well, and it will become the whole book will, you know, become unraveled. When I'm making art or books, I want them to last for as long as possible. So now the next part is gluing this down. Okay, so that's glued, this part is glued, and now I'm going to do exactly the same thing with this. I'm going to pop this aside, and I apply the yes paste everywhere, and then around the edges I apply the other glue, the clear drying, fast drying glue. In the past I've also used PVA glue. but I think I like this glue because it dries much quicker and it doesn't warp the paper. That's the reason. Okay, so I just want to make sure I have a nice even film of glue everywhere. That's done. And now the next step is this one. So just around the edges. I don't go all the way to the edge because once I press the page down, some glue is going to seep out and cover the whole edge. So let's come back with this. I'm just protecting my book with scrap piece of paper. It's always handy to have some scrap paper around to protect your work. Okay, and now, is this the right way up? I think. And now I'm aligning, I hope I'm in frame, I'm aligning here and here. So I align these ones. I don't press down until I'm completely happy with placement. I think I want to push it in just a little bit more. And let me just see. I think I'm quite happy with that. So now I'm going to push down. I'm going to grab my rag and really work that in. Because it's got that thick fabric underneath, it really needs to be pushed down and worked over. So once I do this, make sure it's nice and glued and nice and flat and all the little sections are glued. Just keep going over it, keep going over it. Might be a bit of an overkill the way I do it, but as I said, I like things to really be secure. Okay, so now that I've done that, just make sure that there's no glue seeping out. That's important because if you close your book, then it will get stuck. And if it does, it's not the end of the world, but it's better not to. So now I will do exactly the same thing on the other one. But first, before I do that, I'm actually going to put this under some heavy books, just this section here. I'll put some heavy books here and just to flatten it out even more, and I'll leave it for about half an hour. And once that's completely dried, then I will do this section, because as you can see here, if I start pulling away, the glue isn't dried yet. So that's why I want to put this down just for a little bit, maybe half an hour or longer. Today it will only be half an hour. Usually I'd probably leave it even longer, just to make sure that the glue is dry, everything's held tightly before I go on to this section. So I'm going to go and do that, and I'll actually finish up off camera, and then I'll come back and we'll do the front. All right, I'll be back soon. Okay, so my book is done. Everything is glued and everything is secure. And now the next step is decorating the cover, which I'll just quickly do so you can see sort of, you know, the completion of the book. So I have just pulled out a few bits and pieces that I like to use on this cover. So I'm just going to arrange them how I think would look good, and then I will use my hot glue. So this part I actually find quite difficult, you know, sort of working out where to put little things and how to design it. So I'm just playing around. Maybe something like this. This is the sort of thing that I had in mind, I think. How does that look? Does that look good? Maybe it needs to be a bit closer together so that it looks unified. I think I like that. I'll just go with that. Okay, so I use hot glue gun for this because I'm not sure. How am I going to do this? I'll do this one first. So just a little bit of hot glue gun here. I think hot glue gun, if I was sticking it to plastic, I would be a little bit concerned that it will come off. I know that hot glue gun, it's not permanent, so I don't use it too much, but I use it for these sort of little bits and pieces. And I just like to make sure that none of it is seeping out. I don't want it to be, I don't want you guys to be, or you know, anyone to be able to see the glue. I think it looks messy if it's seeping out. So I'm always being careful that, you know, I don't put too much on, but I put enough so that it holds the piece in place. This might seep out here. So just, you have to work quickly. Okay. That's it. That's in place. No seepage, which is good. Okay, let's keep going. So we'll pop this one here, this little one here, this one, I'll see if I can work out if I can speed this up somehow, but otherwise, after I do this, the project is, well, the construction of the book is complete. I've shown you how to do that. I hope I was making sense. If you have any questions, please comment down below. I read all of the comments, questions. Just let me know and I'll be happy to help get this off. Okay, I think that's it. Yep, I've glued everything down. I might go back and add a little bit of glue to this, but I'm not going to. I'll use my other favorite glue. I'll use this glue for that. Okay, so that's it. Now the next step that you guys would do is decorating, obviously, all of the individual bits and pieces. Another thing that I did in this book was decorating the inside here. So I've got some beautiful trim, this one, like a gold trim, and then I used some gold sticker dots, and that's how I decorated that inner part there. It just makes it look really, really nice and special. So you can see, like, I mean, you can add your own. This is really where your imagination comes into play. How you, I mean, look at that. Does that look beautiful? Gorgeous. All right, so that's the book. That's the construction of the accordion book. Let me know what you think, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.